let's keep in mind that before we start to shade, we want to make sure that the detail matches our reference image as best as we can. So we really want to focus on, drawing what we see in each area. We want to make sure that it is the right size for the composition and that it's in the right place. And so we use something like quadrants, right? We might reevaluate how much space and where it lines up with those lines that we use to divide it up, right? And thinking about what that negative space looks like. So what does the space around like the skull look like, right? What does that look like on my paper that I drew? And I want to match that as best I can. So I noticed when looking at the negative space that I drew the skull down too low and that it was too tall. And so that I went back in and fixed that. I could probably do a little bit more cleanup there, but I want to go ahead and get started showing you how to shade your still life at home. So I am going to start first by cleaning up extra lines. So anything that's not part of your drawing, get rid of your guidelines first. Right? You might also notice that on my paper, something weird happened. When I was erasing something, it wrinkled. And so if you have a wrinkle or you have an indentation in your image, you can transfer this. And so I have another video. You would just rip this out and grab yourself another clean sheet of paper. You'd want to double check once again that there's no grooves or indentations in it, that it's like perfectly clean. And you would tape this down to a window during the daytime and then lay the clean piece of paper on top of it. And then you would carefully outline your image. So that's one way that you can ensure that you have a nice clean piece of paper to start your shading on. For me, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and clean up this one. So I'm going to get rid of any extra lines on the drawing as well to make sure that my outlines are exactly what I want them to be like. I don't want it to look sketchy, right? Also, if your lines are too dominant, they're too strong, real things don't have outlines around them, you might want to take your kneaded eraser and kind of lighten up your lines, right? Sorry about the bouncing there, so that I can clean that up. Now, when you are shading, you want to make sure that you're using the right pencil for the job, and you also want to make sure that you're using a nice sharp pencil. So make sure to sharpen pencils before you begin. And for me, I'm going to be shading on the upper left corner first because I'm a right-handed person. If you are a left-handed person, I'd suggest starting on the upper right and moving towards the left. And I like it that I start at the top because I'm less likely to smudge my work because I won't be touching my work. Okay? So when you are shading, observing the light and shadow is really important. I would suggest using your computer screen as much as you can to get really good values. Sometimes when we print the image, we lose some of the value range. This is a printout from school, and you can see it's a little bit flatter and harder to see, like the pumpkin. And so on the computer image, it's actually easier for me to see those details. Sometimes I go back and I fix the image based on the computer screen after I kind of have some of the basics out. But so I don't have to do a lot of editing of the photos, I'm just going to go ahead and use this printout here. Not editing of the photos, but editing of the video, I should say, that I'm making for you guys here. I'm just going to go ahead and use this photo. So I've got my B pencil. I'm using a 4B pencil. You could use your HB pencil as well. I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and start shading in this gourd. So as I'm shading, I have to first think about how dark this is. And so this is kind of a light value. There's actually some white here. So I'm going to be holding my pencil back kind of far, and I'm going to be shading with the contours of the gourd. So notice how I'm not using straight lines. Instead, I am shading with the direction of the gourd. It's a little bit darker on the edge, and then it moves down into a white area. So I'm gonna leave the white where I see it, right? And I'm kind of following the direction of the gourd. Now I have a stripe here, and I'm gonna look at how it bends, and I'm gonna use the tip of it so it looks a little bit smoother and darker. So I'm using really short, close, overlapping marks. And then as it bends, it gets a little bit darker. So I'm just gonna layer more, and I can adjust my pencil. So I can use the tip of the pencil a little bit more too. And I'm gonna try to draw the gradual transitions from dark to light to make this look 3D. So you've really got to pay attention to the direction of the light and where it's dark and where it's light, and you want to match the values to what you see here. I don't want this to be really light, and I don't want it to be, you know, white. I don't want it to look soft gray. I want to match that value. So what does it look here? I want to make sure it's the same here, right? If you accidentally go too dark, you can always use your kneaded eraser, right, to lighten up the value. And then to kind of go back in and clean it up, okay? I have to go back in and add some of these like warts or bumps that are on my gourd. So I can add those little details in as I go. Right. So, trying to recreate the value of the big shapes, and then go back in and add the detail as well. So we want detail and value, not just generalities, right? And when it's white, leave it white. So as I move to this bigger section, I'm going to make it get a little bit lighter. So the stripe, I can add even after I've shaded it, right? But I want to show you that it is lighter here. And then we have our highlight. And then here again, there's some shadow. Notice, just like when we practice the sphere, that I'm using directional lines. So I am shading with the directions of the shape. And recording the value that I see. So I want to match the darkness as close as I can to my photo so that I can create the illusion of depth. This starts to bend, so notice how I'm shading and changing my position. So I started using some long marks there, but I corrected myself and went some shorter lines. And then I ease up the pencil to kind of create those gradual transitions, right? So record the value as closely as you can, right? And make sure that you are shading with the direction of your object, okay? Right here, let's see if you can actually see it. I go in here and put it in. I found a groove on my pencil or on my paper. And so this is one of the reasons why sometimes people like to transfer. Can you see right here, there's a little indentation in the paper, right? That's because I pressed too hard on an earlier page and there was an indentation in the page. So you want to make sure that this paper is smooth as possible because you'll see those white lines when you're done, okay? So I'm not going to shade this whole thing. Instead, I'm just going to kind of do some of this segment by segment and then show you some of the things in class. But you really want to focus on shading with the right technique. So nice, short, close marks, right? Not picking up the pencil. You want to use the correct pencil for shading the value, right? So if it's really dark, use a 4B. If it's lighter, maybe you want to use an HB. And then make sure that you're cross shading and smoothing it out, representing the light and shadow that you see.